Hello, Internet. Um, that always feels like the lamest way to start a stream, but it's weird, right? Having monologue conversations with a computer is not something humans naturally do. Um, but I wanted to do that for your benefit because a few things recently occurred to me that I thought were worth sharing. It's been a while, it's been months, in fact, since I've done a stream or done any kind of like video recording, but things have been happening, things have been cooking, and I have a few of them that I can share, a few little nuggets of wisdom that have benefited people that I've talked to, um, and have also benefited me. And I just want to share them with you at no cost. So um, I wouldn't say that this is a coaching call or a group coaching call or anything like that, but it is the one to many sharing of wisdom that I think you'll benefit from. One of the first big insights that I'd like to share is that um, there is wisdom in realizing that the worst circumstances afford you the best opportunities. That is a really hard thing to understand. It's a really hard thing to acknowledge and to accept as well. Because, I mean, who wants the worst circumstances? Nobody. Nobody wants to deal with things being the worst. You want exactly the opposite. You want the best circumstances. You want the best outcomes. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Like everybody would want the best. I want the best. I want the best for my son. I want the best for my family. Um, but the way you get there is not by avoiding or fighting your worst circumstances when they arise, your worst situation or whatever when it arises, but by saying, okay, here I am in this awful situation, this awful set of circumstances, this outcome that I did not want, that I fought against, that I resisted, but here I am. And because I'm here, now I can choose how I want to respond to that. You might have fears that come up. You might feel completely triggered. It might feel like your fight or flight response or your fight, flight, or freeze response is fully engaged. And you're just like overwhelmed and locked into the feelings and the need to respond to that. But here's what happens when you do. When you respond to all of those feelings of like it's the end of the world, right? Like you're freaking out. You feed them with focus, you feed them with attention, you feed them with energy, and you amplify them. What you resist persists. The more you fight it, the bigger it gets. The more energy you pour into it, the bigger it gets. And you might say, well, I don't want to just suppress my feelings or avoid my feelings or deny my feelings or whatever. And I agree, you shouldn't do that. That would be a betrayal of your inner life. It would be a betrayal, like a self betrayal. So, what do you do? What do you do if, on the one hand, you can't feed the feelings, you can't give them all of your attention and focus, and you can't act in a way that's really consistent with how you feel, which is to freak out? You can't do that on the one hand, but on the other hand, you can't like suppress it or bury it or ignore it. What you can choose to do is acknowledge what's there. Just acknowledge. That's all you really need to do. Just recognize it, notice it, and allow it. Just allow it to be there. Say, yep, these feelings are here. They definitely are. And they're making me uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with all of these feelings. I'm not okay with what's happening right now. This is not something that is a situation I would choose. I wouldn't go so far as to say this is unacceptable to me, because that's fighting it. That's where you've gone too far, where you say this is unacceptable. Because that's what you really need to do. You need to get to the point where you're saying, I accept that this is what's happening. When you say this is unacceptable, what you're doing is saying, I must make reality different than it is. And you're arguing with reality. And when you do that, reality always wins. So you got to stop saying it's unacceptable. You can say, this is contrary to my values. This is inconsistent with my values as a person. I never would have chosen this. This is a terrible situation. I don't like this. That's all okay. Just acknowledge that you feel that way and that that's where you are in this horrible, effed up situation. But then what? It doesn't change anything. You're like, great. Now I haven't denied my feelings, um, but I'm not acting consistently with my feelings. I've acknowledged they're here, but great. Now nothing has changed. Here's the level up. And here's where you get the best opportunity in the worst circumstances. Now that you've acknowledged your feelings and you're kind of aware of what it would look like, you might ask yourself, maybe you're not aware, maybe you need to pause and reflect. But let's say that after a brief interlude of introspection, you reflect on what it would be like to act consistent with your feelings. Like if you were going to feed that, what would that look like? Well, I would freak out and I would yell at this person and I would, burn this to the ground and this would be terrible. And I would just freak out and I would, like fight or flight. I would run away from everything. I would stick my head in the sand. I would, ruin things for somebody else. I would yell about it. I would try to fix it. I would explain it. I would laugh about it. I would do this, whatever, right? Whatever your natural inclination or impulse would be to vent out all of that frustration and fear and anxiety. You would go all over the place like a little pinball, just bouncing around, slamming into everything. That's what that would look like. Maybe. Or maybe you would just implode. Like some people explode, some people implode, some people just freeze up and they just get locked into a pattern forever. You know what that looks like for you. So what does that look like, right? You ask yourself, does that move me forward towards being the kind of person I want to be? The answer is probably no. It's almost certainly not. Um, and then you might realize that if that's the case, doing the opposite of those things or doing something counterintuitive that's radically different, maybe not the opposite, but counterintuitive and radically different, something that would subvert everyone's expectations, is the correct path forward. I want to say everyone's expectations. I mean, even your own. You might expect that, well, this is the way, whenever I've had that fight, flight, or freeze response in the past, I've always done this. But this time, I want things to be different. And so I'm going to choose a different path. Like I'm going to acknowledge that my impulse is to do this, but really I'm going to take this radically different path. And I'm going to pause and reflect and allow myself some space, even though I'm acknowledging my feelings are here. I'm going to acknowledge that I have a choice to do things differently. And then ask yourself, what is the story that I want to tell about this situation 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 15, 20 years from now? Tell who, it doesn't really matter. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell your significant other, tell your kids, whatever, right? Like, what is the story that you want to tell about this situation? I think the story that you want to tell is the story of how, when you were confronted with the opportunity to give into ego and give into fear and give into freaking out, to giving into really natural, understandable human impulses, like you could have given into that. You could have just reflexively done that, and nobody would have blamed you, by the way. Like in the same situation, lots of people would have done what you did. It's natural after all. If someone cuts you off in traffic, to honk your horn, flip them the bird, yell, watch where you're going, you jerk, whatever, right? It's not you being your best self, but if someone almost crashes into you, you know, that's a lot of people do that. No, it's not abnormal. Contextually, it's normal. It's not noble. It's not honorable. It's not, us being our best selves. In that situation, if you pray for that person and you ask God, Lord, please protect that person, keep them safe. Please don't let them crash into somebody else. Lord, thank you for keeping me safe when that almost happened. Like, if you respond to that situation not with, oh my gosh, that I was nearly in an accident, and you have that fear response, they, almost hit you. How dare they? That's ego, right? Watch where you're going, you dumb jerk. Like, um, that is all ego and fear driven. But if instead you pause and you respond to that situation, that immediate like flare up of fear and wounded pride, if you respond to that with gratitude, with concern for their well being, you know, that is you being your best self. That's you being the best version of you. That's you tapping into grace and a transcendental mindset, a mindset that is supernaturally empowered. And you don't, it's not just for traffic. It's for like the worst. You do that at the worst moments of your life. Um, there have been so many times that I have failed to do this. Only recently, like in the last 3 years, have I begun to do this. I'm 42. The first 39 years of my life, I completely failed to do this most of the time. Maybe there are times where I was my best self, where I, responded to things with supernatural grace. I don't know. I would have to pause and think about it. I haven't really. I will just say, as a generalization, that was not me. I was the guy who said the worst thing at the wrong moment. I remember being terrified of becoming a father for a long time. I was worried that I wouldn't be a good dad. I was terrified that I would be a bad dad. And, I knew that if I had kids, I would love them, but I was just afraid that I didn't have, you know, the patience, the kindness, all of that to be a great dad. And so I was afraid of that. And when my wife got pregnant, I mean, we had 7.5 years of infertility, and we went on fertility drugs and treatments. It was a whole big saga of trying to get pregnant. And then she finally did. And the day that I remember, we were in our living room and she told me that she was pregnant, and I was so surprised. And she said, I just kind of was quiet, I didn't say very much, which is rare for me. She was like, "Are you okay?" And I hate what I said in response. I said, "No, I'm not, but I will be." And I hate that I said I wasn't okay. Um, because even following that up with "I will be" was an acknowledgement that actually I was okay. I was just scared, and I was too proud to admit that. And I really wish that what I had said was, "Yeah, I am okay, actually." Like, if I could go back in time and redo that moment, and she'd, because what I should have done is acknowledge that she was asking me, "Are you okay?" She was probably scared too. I should have thought about how she was feeling and her fear that I wouldn't be okay, right? I should have thought about that. I wish that I had been, but I would just responded to the question. She asked me, "Are you okay?" And so my initial knee jerk reaction was to say, to really think about myself and, like, my normal mindset and all of that. And in the moment, the knee jerk reaction was no, but I will be. Um, but really, if I had paused and given it some real thought, and examined how I actually was feeling in that moment, I like to think that it would have come out something like, you know what? I understand you're probably afraid that I'm not going to be okay with this. You're probably afraid that I don't really want this because I've been afraid for a long time to be a dad. But I know that I am going to be okay and that this is going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And we're going to be great parents because we love each other and we love our son. I didn't know he was going to be a boy at the time. I actually thought, well, anyway, I I didn't, we didn't know, but I was like, we're going to love this kid. We're going to love this kid so much. If I had paused and thought about it, I would have thought about all of the decisions that I had made in my life up to that moment, including marrying my wife, specifically with the idea that someday I could be a dad. One of the reasons I was so attracted to her at the beginning of our relationship was because I knew she'd be a great mom. She was a children's minister in a Baptist church, always loved kids, wanted kids. That was a big deal to her. She always said she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and, always professed those traditional values. And I thought, this is someone whose values I share and someone who I would trust with my child. If we had children, I would be able to trust that she would be a good mom. She would always put the child first and do what was best for the child. I always thought that. I believed that. And that was one of the reasons that I married her. It was very attractive. And if I had really paused and thought about when she asked me, "Are you okay?" I would have said, "Yeah," because I may not have all the answers. I may not be like prepared immediately to like jump right into, baby books and changing diapers and getting the nursery ready. I may not be like in that mindset right now because I've been in the mindset of let's just figure out, can we get pregnant, right? Can we even get there? Um, and I just couldn't even really think past that step to the next one. But if I had, I would have said, yeah, we've done a lot. We've laid a good foundation. We've done a lot to prepare to be parents. And love will see us through. Where our understanding of how to get this done and how to go from A to B, how to accomplish this goal fails, love will fill the gap. I wish I had said that or something like that. I wish I had said, yeah, I'm going to be okay because we're going to love this kid and I've got you and you've got me. We're going to get through this together. I should have acknowledged that she was probably scared and she was probably scared that I, you know, didn't really want that or whatever. I told her for years, I said, I don't really want kids, but the English language is bad at conveying that because that's not the way that it sounds. It's not There's two ways to understand that sentence. It's I don't want kids, I don't have a desire for kids. And then there's I don't want kids. Like I want to not have kids, right? I was never that second option. I was never the person who wanted to not have kids. I never wanted zero kids. I was just so afraid of becoming a father that it kept me from having that strong urge, that strong desire to have kids. Like I didn't need to define myself through fatherhood. I didn't need to define myself in that way. And if that never happened for me, that was going to be okay with me because I had a lot of fears and all the hope and the joy and all of that at that time in my life was kind of choked out by all the fear I had around not being a good dad or, that I wouldn't be a good dad. My son is about to turn 6 and I wish I could go back and tell myself how immeasurably rewarding being a dad has been for these 6 years and how after his mom left 3 years ago, he's become like my whole world. it's my faith and my son. Those are the two most rewarding aspects of my life. And without him, it's hard to see how I would have made it through the divorce. Like Liam has just he's just miraculous. He's taught me so much about how to relate to my own father in a better way, how to relate to God as my father as well. I heard someone once say that children are our spiritual teachers, and I think that's true in a lot of ways. And Liam has taught me so much. The relationship that I have with him and the things that I want for him and the behaviors that I want to see in him, they're also things that I need, right? Like I want him to obey me, not because I need to flex my authority or like have some ego trip about telling him what to do, but I want him to obey me because I want to protect him and I want to provide for him and I want the best for him. And I genuinely see if you just do this, things will be better for you. And every time I try to explain that to him, I think, man, I need to be doing what God tells me in my life for exactly the same reason. I need to be a good son. And so every time I teach him something or every time I engage with him in that paternal way, it almost always reflects me back to God. It reflects back to me my relationship with God. It makes me want to be more obedient to God, to be a better person. And there are all of these kinds of lessons that I've picked up. And every time I go back and look at one of the big regrets that I have in my life, like, for example, telling my wife I'm not okay, but I will be. That was kind of weak sauce, man. Like, what a terrible response, right? I shouldn't have said that. But every time I reflect on that and I think, how would I do it better now? It does show me that I've actually learned the lessons. Um, I know how I would respond better in those situations. There's so many times that I didn't show up as the best version of me in the worst moments of my life and my life with others, together with others. There were so many times that I gave some weak response like that. That now, with the wisdom of hindsight and you know a better perspective, a healthier perspective, both spiritually and mentally, I just have a better perspective now. I look back at those moments and I'm like, I would have handled that completely differently. Another one was, when my wife lost her job. And part of me responded in a good way. Like, I responded in kind of a good way. Like, I said, hey, look, I build companies for a living. Um, I can help you go freelance and do what you were doing for your former employer. You can do that freelance. I'll buy you a computer. So I bought her a computer. I helped her, come up with a brand, with a name for her business, and I did all of that. And she said, really, I could work. I was like, you can just work from home. You can be freelance. My law firm will be your first customer, your first client, and you can just be like freelance person. And she said, really, could I really do that? And I said, yeah, you absolutely can. And that part was good. But there was another part too. It was an I told you so. I had told her probably a year prior to that I didn't think her company was going where she thought it was going to go. The company that she'd been working for, not her company, but the company that she'd been working for. She was really optimistic about it, loved her coworkers and like the team and everything like that. And she'd talk about work all the time and the people that she worked with in laudatory tones. And she had a lot of enthusiasm, but I had met some of them at a Christmas party, and my initial read was like, I don't know if this is going to go where you think it's going to go. And um, I won't get into all the details, but about a year later, there were some significant changes in the leadership of the company. I think we can say that. And um, my wife kind of got caught in the crossfire of that and lost her job. And I should have just said something like, you know what? You probably expect me to say, I told you so. You probably expect me to say, I told you so. You probably expect me to kind of pile on or make you feel bad, or nobody listens to Noel. You should have listened to me, a year ago. And I should have said, you probably expect that, but listen, I don't want to say any of that. I actually don't. Um, I want you to know that we're going to be okay. This is going to be okay. I'm here for you. I support you. I love you. And all that I told you so that you probably expect from me, you can just breathe a deep sigh of relief and know that I'm not going to say any of that. Okay. And I don't even want to think about that or talk about that. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, and that if you want to get a different job, that's okay. If you want to be freelance and do your own thing, I'll support you that way too. Whatever you choose, I'll support. I wish I had done that. There were times when we struggled in, either her business or my business, or, whatever was going on, where we would fight over how we were going to make everything work and what the best way to allocate our professional efforts was, what the best way was for each of us to allocate our professional efforts. We would argue over that. And there were so many of those conversations where I just really thought I was right. And I zealously and passionately argued for what I genuinely thought was in the best interest of our family. And if I could go back to each one of those arguments, I would have said, you know what? I have an opinion about what's best, but I need you in my life more than I need to be right about this. I need a good relationship with you more than I need to be successful in my business, or to have my own law practice, or to do this endeavor or that endeavor, or to be right about anything. You know, I wish I had understood then that it's more important to be kind than to be right. After I converted to Catholicism, I genuinely had the zeal of a convert, and I felt like my whole life I had been kind of misled, as a Protestant, because I no longer believed a lot of the things that I had believed most of my life. I believed new things and different things. I felt like I had a better understanding, a clearer awareness of the fullness of spiritual truth. Not that I knew everything. I never believed that and don't believe that now. Um, if anything, I thought all the things that I thought I knew, lots of them were wrong, and that there were lots more limits to what I could actually know and did actually know. Like, becoming Catholic is humbling, right? It's profoundly humbling. But the way I responded to that was actually kind of arrogant in an ironic way, right? I was really trying to define myself again as a new convert with zeal for my newfound and rejuvenated faith. And I did that by being very critical of what I had believed before. And by extension, I think a lot of the people that I talk to, like most of my family and friends, Protestant still, I was not charitable. I was not charitable in the way I communicated about my faith to them. And honestly, I felt really attacked a lot of the time, and I felt put upon, again, like the wounded pride I felt like, people would ask me, well, why are you doing that? Why did you do that? Why did you convert? Why did you, what makes you believe that? And I felt like my back was against the wall. I felt defensive. And those are some of the hardest times. And they were some of the best opportunities, and I wasted them. Those hard moments, whether it was I could have showed up better for my wife when she lost her job. I mean, I partly did a good thing. I did support her in the end, but there was the I told you so that kind of ruined it, right? When I converted, I wasn't charitable. I had an opportunity to be very charitable, but instead I was just zealous and passionate, wanted to advocate for my view out of this misguided notion, still kind of left over from the Protestant approach to apologetics, which is all about just persuading people that you're right, that your view is the right view, and blah 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 blah. Because you want to save their souls. It's just like, I want to save your soul. I want you to see what I see. I want you to believe what I believe, so we can all go to heaven together. It ultimately is a loving desire, but it's buried. That love is buried under layers and layers and layers of needing to be right. And a lot of those layers of needing to be right are actually tied to fear that you're wrong, and fear that if you're wrong, then you might not end up in eternity where you want to end up. So it's weird, it's complex, it's nuanced, right? Ultimately, I love every single member of my family. I love my friends, Catholic, Protestant. I love them all. I want them all to go to heaven. I want God's grace to cover everybody. I don't want anybody um, to end up eternally separated from God. I don't want that. And every time that I've ever argued in favor of the things that I believe, it's been out of a desire that we all end up in the same place. Not because I think I'm better than them and I think I'm going here and you're going there. I don't want that. That's not my intention. That's never been my intention. It's never a sense of like pharisaical spiritual superiority. I felt misled, and I don't want you to be misled. That was the way I felt. And now, in retrospect, in hindsight, I feel very differently, even from the way I felt as a new convert. Those were hard, some of the hardest times, and they had wonderful opportunities baked into them that I didn't see for want of maturity, for want of perspective, for want of patience with myself and others. And I see now that the worst times, the hardest times, have the best opportunities in them, because I could, like, if I could get in a time machine and go back, I know exactly how I would have handled that differently. If someone had asked me, why did you convert to Catholicism, I'd say, because I've been on a lifelong search for truth wherever I find it, and this is where it's led me. That's It's so simple. I've been on a search for truth my whole life, and here's where I am today. That's me. That's my journey. And I love you. I love you. I love you right where you are. It's not my place to judge. It's not my place to tell you that what you believe is wrong. I used to believe what you believe, and I understand why you believe what you believe. I respect it. I understand it. I don't agree with it anymore. It's not where I am right now. But it doesn't make me love you any less. And I pray for you now more than I ever have. I hope that encourages you. I hope you find it uplifting. I've recently been giving a lot of thought. I've written 4 books, and I've recently been giving a lot of thought to the next book that I want to write. And I've got several competing ideas. And one of them is a book about how, as a convert, to have conversations with the people that you really want to persuade. It's kind of, I don't want to say an anti-apologetics book, because it's not that. It's an anti-proselytizing book. I don't think we should do that very much. I do think that we should practice the corporal works of mercy, and with great patience and charity and discernment, we should practice the spiritual works of mercy. Go real light on admonishing the sinner, go real light on instructing the ignorant, go kind of medium on counseling the doubtful, right? But don't be quick to correct, and don't be quick to judge or to create the impression that you are. That would be the core theme of the book. It would be like, look, you're not going to persuade anybody that you're right and thereby get them into heaven. Never. You can't persuade people into heaven, just like you can't scare them into heaven. You can only love them there. You can only reflect God's love with kindness, with absolute kindness and humility and patience. You're going to have to bite your tongue a lot. And you're just going to have to love them until they see Christ in you and they want that. That's the only way, really. I follow some people on Facebook that have made me want to write this book and have shown me, they've held up kind of a mirror to me. And I read their posts on Facebook and I'm like, oh, that's what I sounded like. Like, oh, I was that really abrasive, cringy convert. Ah, like, oh man, I see why you're doing, I know why you're saying that. And really, substantively, I don't disagree with it. But oh man, you are turning people off because there's no charity in what you're saying, in your tone. Like, I know you're coming from a good place, and I know your background is arguing, persuading, presenting the logical argument, being rational, being reasonable. And you think that that's going to make something click in their mind and they go, oh, I get it now. And then they come into the church. They come into the fullness of truth. They come into full communion with the body of Christ. You think that's what's going to happen. That's not what's going to happen. Instead, you're going to be pushy and rigid and abrasive, and they're going to tune you out. They're not going to listen to you. I know, because that's me. I was that guy. And I would do anything to go back to 2014 when I came into the church and tell myself 10 years younger, hey, look, you are passionate about your faith, and that's great. I'm so glad that you're closer to Jesus than you've ever been, and that you have this joy and this exuberance and this renewed depth of faith and curiosity, and you can't get enough of this and all the learning and everything. That's exciting. But remember, not everyone else in your life is where you are. Not that you're further along or more advanced, because you're not. Not everyone else is persuaded of the same things that you're persuaded of. And you are not going to persuade them. Even if you present the perfect logical argument, it's never going to be enough. You can't logic someone into heaven. You can't. You can only love them into heaven. And if you show up in a less than charitable way, a less than humble way, a less than patient way in other people's lives, if you do that, if you lack patience and humility and charity, it doesn't matter what you say. St. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13 that even if he had all faith, maximum faith, and spoke in the tongues of angels, but he lacked charity, he was nothing, basically dead. spiritually. Without charity, without love, without kindness and humility, it doesn't matter how right you are. You will be right, and you will, with your rightness, you will drive people out of the kingdom of heaven. And I wish I could go back. The worst times, the worst times, the hardest times have the best opportunities. And no matter how hard things are for you, you might be you might be going through something horrible right now. A divorce, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job. I've been through all of those, all of them. And not just alone, but with other people that I'm close to. Illness, uh, chronic stress, like feeling like it's one thing after another and it's never going to end. I know. I get it. And I've supported people as a coach and as a lawyer who've been through horrible things: loss of a business, betrayal by family, betrayal by business partners, you know, the best and worst of humanity. I've supported them. And I'm here to tell you that no matter what you're going through, no matter how horrible it is, you have an opportunity that's once, man, I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but it's rare. You have a rare opportunity to be a transcendental version of yourself, to tap into grace that is beyond you, divine grace, divine power, power from God. Grace is the power to live your faith. And if you start with humility and patience, you can practice that faith. You can't let wounded pride get in your way. You can't let fear get in your way. And the way you get around those is you humble yourself and you take a moment, you get patient with yourself and with others, and you have enough, faith. You say, well, if I believed that everything that's happening right now could work out in the best possible way, what would that look like? What story do I want to tell about this moment 5 years from now? What story do I want to be telling people 10 years from now? I wish that I could tell the story of when my wife lost her job differently. I wish I could tell that story and say, I told her, I never said I told you so ever, right? I told her, I love you. I support you. I'm here for you. And if you want to go look for another job, you can do that. If you want to go freelance, you can do that. If you just want to stay at home for a while and just do nothing, I trust that God will provide for us, and you can do that too. And we will be okay. And no matter what, I will always, always, always be here for you. And I will never love you any less or treat you any differently. It's going to be okay. And we're going to be okay. I wish I could tell the story that way. I wish I could tell the story of my conversion that in a different way too. I wish I could say, when I was challenged, I just accepted that where I was in my journey was enough. And I wish I wouldn't have been defensive and logical and analytical as a defense mechanism for how, scared I was that other people weren't going to accept me. Because all that became self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I wasn't accepted because of the way I badly reacted to feelings that I wasn't being accepted. The more I focused on the fear that I wouldn't be accepted and defended my decision and like presented all my arguments, the more I fed that fear. And sure enough, I was rejected by family and friends. My wife left ultimately. I think my conversion to Catholicism played no small part in that. Um, and it wasn't so much that I converted to Catholicism, but just the way that I was as a Catholic convert, I think probably was just very off putting and difficult for her to deal with. And that may have contributed significantly. I own that. I wish I could tell that story differently. I wish I could say that I felt secure enough um, in what I was doing, that it was right and all of that, which I did. I did feel that it was the right thing for me to do. I've never thought that was a mistake, but I wish that I had had the emotional maturity to just let that be enough and not have to defend it. To just say, well, this is where I am. I've been on a search for truth in my life, and this is where that search has brought me. I wish I could tell that story differently. And then just reaffirm that I still love people and I respect them, and I don't need for them to agree with me for us to get along, and things don't have to be an argument. And when other people try to start arguments with me, which did happen, I still have the emails. I mean, that happened. But instead of engaging with all of that, just be like, you know what? I love you. God loves you. I'm not going to argue with you. Like, if you want the resources, instead of arguing with me, I encourage you to follow the same path that I did. RCIA is there, or now it's called OCIA, but the Catholic Church is there. It's been there for 2,000 years. It's not going anywhere. And if you're interested in the resources, here's where you can find them. I don't need to be that resource for you. I don't need to defend my decision to you. Instead, here you go. And I wish you well, and I love you, and I'm praying for you. I want the best for you. I wish that I had just been humble and open and loving and left it at that and not argued or tried to defend it. When I was a Protestant, when I went to seminary, I went to a Baptist seminary. That was what I did even then. Like, it was apologetics, always be prepared to give an answer. Just like, know how to defend your faith, have good arguments, and, back them up with the Bible and all that jazz. And when I converted to Catholicism, I mean, like, all of that served me well as long as everybody that I was talking to already agreed with me. But whenever I converted and we no longer agreed, it just served to drive a wedge and alienate and separate. And I wish I could tell that story differently. So whatever you're going through, I want you to really think about, how do you want to tell this story in 5 years or 10? What story do you want to tell? I can guarantee that if you feed the feelings, the wounded pride and the fear and all of that, if you feed those feelings, you're not going to end up with the story that you want. But if you feed your faith and you accept with patience and humility yourself and your circumstances right where you are, however they are, if you can get to that point by the grace and power of God, then you can really say, well, what I'd like to be able to say is that when my spouse brought me this unexpected pregnancy or this job loss or a relative who's suddenly died, and now they're like, I didn't expect that. So and so had a heart attack or whatever, right? Was in an accident or got a diagnosis they didn't like. And oh my gosh, and they're devastated, and they bring you that, right? You want to be able to tell the story of how you were the heroic spouse, the it's okay spouse, the reassuring, hey, no matter what, no matter how this shakes out, I'm here with you. I'm in this with you. If you want to talk about it, I'll listen. I don't need to fix this. This doesn't have to get fixed, and it doesn't have to get fixed right now. It's just, I'm here with you in it. No matter what you need, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be there. I don't know how. I don't have all the answers. We're going to figure it out together. I love you. And there's absolutely no problem that's bigger than my love for you or more important to solve than our relationship, you know? Always put that first. I wish I could do that. I wish I could go back in time and do that. Regret, I think, is a powerful thing. It's a tool. It's not something to wallow in, and I don't. I don't wallow in my regrets, but I do reflect on them. Regret's a powerful tool because it tells us how to be the next time. It's the way we redeem our failures and we transform them into feedback. There's a chapter in my book, Lead Again, about this. It's not specifically so much about regret, but it is about transforming failure into feedback and how failure is actually really valuable and we need to fail. It's the way we learn. It's the principal way that we learn is by failing. You don't learn anything new if you have a hypothesis and things turn out exactly the way you expected, and it's just confirming your hypothesis and you haven't learned anything new. The universe is as you expected it to be. Where you learn something new is where you have a hypothesis and you test it and it doesn't work out the way you expected. I have not been afraid to experiment in my life. I probably should have been more afraid to experiment than I have. Um, Things have not turned out the way that I would have liked. A lot. There've been a lot of failures, a lot of regrets, and a lot of lessons learned. So while I do wish that I could get in a time machine and go back and have conversations differently, treat people differently, show up differently for people, I know now that I've learned how to do that. And it's not a total loss. It's not without purpose. It's not without redemption. I know that now, if I had the opportunity to show up in a transcendental way in the lives of the people that I love, that I can do that. I know that when the rubber meets the road, when things get really hard, that I can show up the way I'm supposed to. I can show up with reassurance that things are going to be okay, that where understanding fails, love will fill the gap, and that I'm not going to go away. You know, I'm not going to abandon people, um, and I'm not going to be governed by ego or fear. Instead, we'll get through things together, and there will be love and listening. It'll be all right. And even if Liam is the only person who benefits from that, my son, you know, then good. Okay, that's fine. You know, I do pray for reconciliation in my family. I do love Liam's mother very much. And of course, I would love to have another chance for Liam to have an entire home, like a complete family. That's my prayer every day. But if that never happens and Liam is, um, Liam and I are just kind of doing our thing, just him and me, right? Um, at least I will be able to bring these lessons to bear for his benefit. You know, I'm glad that I've learned the lessons, even though the way that I've had to learn them has been brutal, just difficult beyond words. I know that there is There is something good. There's a shining pearl of an opportunity in every difficult circumstance. And I take a lot of, not pride, but pleasure. It's a privilege to be able to support my coaching clients and my legal clients when they're going through really hard things. One of the primary benefits of the work that I'm able to do with them is to give them the space and the perspective, to be able to hold some space open for them and give them perspective to help them reach that um, transcendental state, that mindset where they can ask themselves, they can pause and ask themselves, what story do I want to tell in this situation? Because it's hard to do that on your own. Like in the moment, without somebody else's help, just doing that on your own, it's really, really hard. No one could overstate the difficulty of that. Having a coach or someone to support you there and help you talk through the situation in the moment when things are intense and heavy and you just want to react with wounded pride or with fear or with anger or whatever, like whatever those natural human emotional reactions are, when you want to do that, when you are pulled into that and it feels like the pull is just more than you could ever resist, it's inexorable, right? Having someone there that you can call and be like, hey, I'm in it, I'm in this fight or flight thing, I'm freaking out, I need you to help me through this. Having that is an amazing resource. And that's what I provide. I provide, like, okay, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Let's figure it out. I know here remind the person of their ethos, their values. This is what's important. Let's make sure we keep our priorities straight in this moment. Let's take a minute. Don't freak out. Don't panic. Take a breath. Get some space. And now let's ask ourselves, what story do we want to tell? How do we want to show up here? And how can we do that? Like, how can we think about where I want to be in 5 or 10 years? And then how do I kind of walk it back? Like, what do I need to do today to make that possible, to unlock that as an option? I'll leave you with this. One of my biggest supporters, one of the people who, when my wife left, really made it possible for me to survive that and to deal with it. His name is Matt Corlett, and I will always be thankful, like always will be grateful for his guidance and his friendship. Katrina Starr, she also was instrumental. She introduced me to Matt. She was an amazing person. Both of them held space for me. Both of them helped me to get perspective and talk through some things. But I specifically remember one of the sessions that I had with Matt, wherein he said, I want you to think about a time in the future, let's say 10 years from now, sort of the genesis of this idea that I've been talking about. He said, think about a moment 10 years from now where everything worked out. And he said, picture that scene in your mind. And I remember thinking, it's about 10 years in the future. And he said, imagine a scene. I didn't have to tell him what it was. He was just guiding me to help me imagine it. And I imagined it was celebrating Christmas, So Christmas in 2030 or 2031, Liam is like 12 years old or something. 12, 13. And he's like, imagine that everything worked out. And I'm like, okay, Devin and I, we worked out our differences. We improved our communication. We forgave. We healed. We love each other. We decided to put Liam's interests first and give him the home that he deserves and the chance at a 2-parent home that he deserves. We both decided that. We're both finally on the same page about that. And he said, now imagine how you feel in that moment. How do you feel about each person in the room? And I thought about how felt about my in laws, how I felt about Devin, how I felt about my family, how I felt about Liam. You know, just imagine that it all worked out and that everything was good, really good. He said, feel that. And he said, now you can feel that anytime. You just have to remember to do it. You can go back to that feeling, that place. And whenever things are difficult and you're feeling triggered, or, you know, you're feeling put on the defensive or whatever, the goal is to go back to that feeling, to show up with that love first, to let that be your reaction, to let the love and the safety and the peace be your starting point, because that's where you want to end up, right? And where you end up is largely dependent on what feelings you feed. And if you feed the feelings of fear, you feed the feelings of wounded pride, if you feed all of that, you're going to get more of that. You're going to amplify more of that. But that's not part of that scene. Those feelings aren't in that scene. They're not anywhere in me. There is no, in my future where I want to go, there is nothing but virtue. There's no vice. There's no pride, there's no wrath, there's no envy. There's none of that. There's humility and faith and hope and charity and prudence and temperance and fortitude. There's kindness and patience. That's it. That's where I want to go. That's where I want to end up. And if I feed anything but that, it's a distraction. And so every time you end up in a hard moment, every time I end up in a hard moment, I have to at least try to make the conscious effort to show up with love and kindness and patience. Love and kindness and patience always. Humility is the foundation of that, right? It's the first thing that gets you there. It opens the door to everything else. Humility first, but then love and patience and kindness. And then other things get easier from there. And I still, it's been a couple of years since Matt and I had that session. I won't ever forget it. It's still the dream, right? So, you just got to keep feeding that. You got to feed those feelings, the ones you want, not the ones you don't want. And it's not easy. But the hardest times and the worst times have the biggest opportunities, the best and brightest opportunities. Because if you can be a transcendental, divinely empowered, grace-filled version of yourself at the hardest times, the worst possible times, the daily mundane stuff, is obviously a lot easier. And, wouldn't it be great for your spouse to say, you know what, I lost my job, or I quit my job, or I got this diagnosis, or I found out I was pregnant unexpectedly, or so and so died in my family, or my friend betrayed me, and I've had a falling out with my friend, and I lost this childhood friend. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, right? But this happened, and I came to my spouse, and they said, it's going to be okay. I don't know how, but we're going to, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Those are, this all, no matter what horrible, harrowing thing comes your way, it always falls within the vows. So When you're married, whether it's richer or poorer, or in sickness and in health, or for better or for worse. For better or for worse is a great catch-all, right? That's everything, right? Whether you're better or you're worse. Um, this all falls under our vows, and I'm going to honor that. I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to be here with you. Whatever you need, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it together. You want your spouse to say, that's what they said. That's what my husband said. That's what my wife said. And I didn't expect it. I expected them to get angry. I expected them to yell. I expected them to freak out. I expected them to freak out as much as I was freaking out. But instead, they told me they loved me. They hugged me. They said, we're going to get through this together. They admitted humbly that they didn't know how, but in faith, reassured me that we would get through it together. I think that's what everybody really wants. I think that's the kind of Hallmark Channel fantasy of marriage. And that fantasy can be a reality. It's not like, it's not like a lottery style fantasy. Like you have to, like something crazy improbable has to happen. This is like everyday heroism. This is the kind of heroism that anybody could show up with if they just had the self-awareness and the will to do it. So you can do this. Everybody can do this. And before long, life will give you an opportunity to do this for your spouse, for a family member, for a friend. People go through difficult stuff all the time, every day. And you can be that person who shows up for somebody else and says, I don't know how it's going to work out, but it's going to work out. And I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I've got you. Because I love you. And I care about you. And I'm going to be there for you. And you just show up for people the way you want other people to show up for you. It's kind of the golden rule, The hardest times, the worst times, contain the greatest opportunities. And I was too busy in so many moments of my life that I regret. I was too busy focusing on how hard the moment was. I was so focused on that, how I felt and the difficulty of all of that I missed the opportunities. Here in the last few years, I haven't missed as many opportunities. I'm not saying that I don't still fall into old patterns. Old habits die hard, but they do die. That's the optimistic, like the good news, right? That's the good thing. Old habits may die hard, but they can die. And you can beat habits. You can beat bad habits of thought, bad habits of behavior. You can beat it. You can be a better person. You don't have to be stuck. You don't have to be stuck with your old narratives. You don't have to be stuck with your old identity. You don't have to be the person that everybody thinks you are or that everybody has said that you are. You don't have to continue to even be the same person that you've said you were. You can be honest. You can be honest. You can be a good person. You don't have to keep telling the same old lies to yourself or to others. You can be honest. And you can be charitable. You can be forgiving. You can be kind. You can be merciful. You can be a better person. You can be a person who's better than you even think you can be by the power of God, right? So I hope that you'll choose that, because it's an everyday heroism. Everybody can do it. Everybody can be a hero for somebody, whether it's your spouse or your child or your friends or whoever. You can do it, and you should. I think you should. I hope you will. And I hope that this talk has been helpful. Like I said, this is just stuff that's kind of been percolating. in my mind, things I've been thinking about, um, little insights that have come to me. I haven't written much of this down except here and there, um, but it's all just kind of been percolating for a while, and I just needed to get it out there today. I felt like, for whatever reason, today was the day. So I hope it's helpful to you, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And if you did, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd like to know which parts of this resonated with you. Um, if you want help, reach out to me. I'm an easy guy to get a hold of. I do offer coaching support. Um, I'm a certified life coach and NLP practitioner, so I do some of that. I have some skills that, proper training and all of that for coaching. And I'd love to support you if you need that kind of help and support. Um, Matt really poured so much, and still from time to time continues to pour so much time and love and effort into my life, that I want to honor that by showing up for other people in a similar way. Like, the gift that he has given me of his presence and his wisdom and his insight. I just want to be that kind of a person for other people. Um, and he's not the only one. I mention him because I see him as a mentor more than most. But there have been other people too that I could. They're all in the acknowledgement section of my book, but everybody on that list is there for a reason. I owe them a debt of gratitude and love, and I try to honor that with the work that I do. So whether it's this video or coaching sessions or something like that, I'm always just trying to pay it forward, really. So again, hope it was useful to you, and if you like this, you can subscribe or follow the channel or whatever. Just kind of stay tuned, because I'll be posting stuff like this from time to time. Hopefully, it won't be like, I don't know, what was it, 4 months? I think it's been like 4 months since the last video. Hopefully, it won't be 4 months between videos. But yeah. All right. I think that's enough for today. And thanks for tuning in. I hope you watched the whole thing. But if you didn't, I totally understand. An hour and 17 minutes is a long time. So